Why are narcissists unable to see themselves? They have a mirror problem. If you're a narcissist or have narcissistic traits or want to understand the narcissist because you know one or you're in a relationship with one, this video will help you understand them and perhaps cope. Maybe you already know something's wrong. You know something is wrong in the way that it shows up at 3 a.m. when you don't have to perform anymore, in the exhaustion you don't want to admit to, in the distance between who you say you are and who you fear you actually are. This series is for people who are a narcissist or who carry enough narcissistic traits that the description fits better than anything else they've found. People who are tired of the armor, tired of the show, tired of the loneliness that sits underneath the grandiosity, like a second heartbeat. If that's you, and if you're still watching, something brought you here. This is the right place to start. The first thing you need to understand is the mirror problem. And to understand the mirror problem, you need to understand what the false self is and why it was built. When a psychologically healthy person looks in a mirror, they see themselves, not a perfect version or a performance, just themselves with the gaps and the contradictions, the parts that don't add up, all of it visible. The narcissist cannot do this. Sam Vaknin, the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, points out that the narcissist experiences their false self the same way a healthy person experiences their true self. The experience is identical, which means the narcissist cannot tell the difference. They look in the mirror and what they see feels real. It feels like them. It feels like the truth. It's not. The false self is a composite, a construction built in childhood as a response to an environment that could not tolerate the real child. When the genuine self was invalidated, punished, ignored, or objectified, when the child learned that being truly seen was dangerous, they did was what any nervous system does when survival is at stake. They adapted. They built an alternative, a version designed to get the love, the validation, the safety that the real self could not secure. This wasn't a conscious decision. A 5-year-old does not sit down and design a false self. It's not strategic. It is not calculated. It's a defense mechanism so profound and so early established that it becomes indistinguishable from identity itself. By the time the child is old enough to question what they are, the false self is already all they know. Donald Winnicott, the British pediatrician and psychoanalyst, first described this phenomenon in the 1960s. He called it the false self, a protective formation that develops in children who could not safely be themselves. Vaknin has spent decades elaborating on how this plays out in adult pathological narcissism, and the core dynamic is this. The false self was built to survive, and it works, but it was never meant to be inhabited permanently, and the cost of living inside it is very high. Here's where it gets difficult. The false self was designed to prevent exactly the kind of self-examination that change requires. It's not simply a mask, like a thin cover that could be removed if the person simply decided to be more authentic. It is an entire operating system. It runs continuously. It is the lens through which every piece of information from the outside world is processed and interpreted. When feedback comes in, like a partner, a friend, a colleague, or a therapist feedback, the system does not evaluate it. It categorizes it. Everything is sorted into one of two bins: confirmation or attack. Confirmation or attack. In other words, does it confirm its bias or does it attack its bias? You might be asking, where's the in-between where everything lives? If someone says something that aligns with the false self's narrative, it is absorbed as evidence of greatness, intelligence, superiority. It feeds the system. If someone says something that challenges or contradicts the false self's narrative, it's rejected, it's reframed. The messenger is discredited. They're either jealous, ignorant, threatening, and or malicious. The information bounces off without landing. There is no third option. There is no calibration. There's no nuance. There is no moment where the narcissist sits with feedback, weighs it, allows it to complicate their self-image, and updates their self-model accordingly. This is not stubbornness. This is not pride. This is architecture. Vecni points it this way. When a narcissist self-observes, when they introspect, when they see what they see is only the false self. The false self and the self-concept are not two separate things that can be compared or contrasted. They are coexistent. They occupy the same psychological space. There is no observer standing apart from the performance, watching and asking whether the performance is accurate. The narcissist cannot self-observe in any meaningful way because the thing doing the observing is the same thing being observed. It is like trying to see your own face without a mirror, except in this case, the mirror is also your face. This is the mirror problem in its purest form. Now, what does it cost to live like this? The performance never stops. The grandiosity is not experienced as a pleasant state, not the way it might appear from the outside, where the narcissist seems to float above everyone else on a cushion of confidence. It is exhausting. It requires constant maintenance. The inner voice that evaluates every interaction, calculates every response, manages every impression. It runs from morning until night and often through the night as well. There is no off switch. The narcissist requires what Wagner calls narcissistic supply, a continuous flow of validation, admiration, and attention from the outside world to maintain the internal equilibrium. Look at it as gas for a vehicle. When supply is plentiful, the architecture holds. When the supply is disrupted, devalued, or withdrawn, the whole structure destabilizes. This is experienced as narcissistic injury, and the response is always proportional to how deeply the wound touched the underlying fragility. But the cost is not only in the dependency on external validation. The cost is in the inability to grow. A person who cannot accurately perceive themselves cannot accurately perceive where they are misaligned with reality. They can be told repeatedly, sincerely by people who love them that a behavior is harmful, that a pattern is destructive, that a relationship is failing, and none of it will land. It's not because the narcissist is stupid or deaf or unwilling. It's because there is no mechanism inside that can receive the information and translate it into change. The system was not built to update. It was built to persist. The narcissist knows many things. They know how to perform. They know how to manipulate. They know how to present. They accumulate information about the world and use it strategically. What they cannot do is know themselves, not in the way that the word know implies understanding rather than just data. And this creates a specific kind of suffering that is rarely acknowledged. The loneliness of the narcissist is not the loneliness of someone who is rejected by others. It is the loneliness of someone who cannot be known, because the self that could be known has been buried under the construction, and the construction insists it is the original. Here's what this looks like in practice. The narcissist has the same argument with their partner 50 times. They say different words, use different excuses, or blame different causes, but the underlying pattern never shifts. The partner says, "You don't hear me when I'm upset." The narcissist hears this, remembers it, files it, and then proceeds to not hear it the next time, because an architecture does not permit the information to alter behavior. The narcissist can recite back what their partner said. They can repeat it word for word. They cannot let it in. Here's another way. The narcissist gets passed over for a promotion and is told genuinely and kindly that they interrupt in meetings, dismiss other people's contributions, and take credit for collaborative work. The narcissist will remember this feedback with perfect clarity and will experience it as unfair, as jealousy from the colleagues, as a manager who doesn't understand their genius. The content of the feedback is processed. The implication that a change in their behavior is needed is rejected. The architecture protects itself. This is why self-help so rarely works for narcissists and why they are often the most voracious consumers of self-help content while changing the least. They read the books, absorb the concepts, quote the authors, and then apply none of it. Because application would require the admission that something is fundamentally wrong with the current operating system. And that the admission is architecturally impossible until the mirror can actually function. The mirror cannot function while the false self is running the show. Which brings us to what change actually requires. Not self-help, not productivity techniques, not becoming a better person through sheer force of habits or willpower. These are behaviors performed at the surface level of the false self. Cosmetic adjustments to the performance that leave the architecture completely intact. Change, if it is at all possible, requires something far more radical than behavior modification. It requires disidentification with the false self. It requires the willingness to look at the thing you have built to protect yourself and recognize it for what it is, a survival response that outlived its usefulness, but you are still that you are still inside. This is not a comfortable proposition. To look at the false self clearly is experienced, at least initially, as annihilation. Vaknin describes it as a kind of a death. The narcissist reports experiencing genuine existential terror at the prospect of the false self being dismantled because the false self is experienced as the self. To threaten it feels exactly like being threatened. The panic is real. The sense of erasure is real. The feeling that if this mask comes off, nothing will be left, that is felt. That is a felt experience of someone who has never encountered their own true self because the true self was covered over so early and so thoroughly that it never fully developed. And this is why so few narcissists change, and why the ones who do change only do so after a significant crisis, often one that shatters the false self involuntarily. Vaknin calls this narcissistic mortification, when reality breaks through the false self's defenses and forces a confrontation with who the person actually is, separate from the performance. The mirror finally works, but only because the glass has been smashed. And this is where my suggestions from the book OLNE begins. The book OLNE consists the relationship personal development framework developed by Ron John, offers a frame that makes the mirror problem navigable rather than catastrophic. Not easy, navigable, specifically non-judgmental acceptance. Non-judgmental acceptance is not approval. It is not the same as saying that destructive behavior is acceptable, or that the narcissist's actions have not caused real harm to real people. It is a specific recognition that everything we are and everything we do arises from neurobiology, history, and circumstance, and that the decisions we make are the products of preceding causes we did not choose. Free will in the OLNE frame is not what most people believe it to be. It's a misnomer. The decisions we make, including the decisions to build a false self at age 5 to survive an invalidating environment are caused by a chain of events that preceded them. The child did not choose their neurobiology. The child did not choose the family they were born into. The child did not choose the specific hurt that made the false self necessary. The child did not choose to develop narcissism. And the adult narcissist did not choose the circumstances that shaped them, even as they continue to make choices that, as adults, that cause harm. This does not make the narcissist innocent. There is no innocence in a 5-year-old, only survival. But there is also no blame in a 5-year-old, only cause and effect. Non-judgmental acceptance separates the person from the pattern. It says, this is what was built, and this is why it was built. And it does not excuse the building. It explains it. And here's why this matters for the mirror problem specifically. The defense system activates when it perceives threat. When the narcissist hears criticism, the system reads it as attack, because attack is what it was built to defend against. The response is immediate and automatic. Discredit the source, reject the information, protect the structure. But non-judgmental acceptance offers something that the defense system was not designed to process: understanding rather than judgment. It's the difference between you are wrong and bad versus this is what was built and this is why it was built. One triggers the architecture, the other does not. When the narcissist begins to look at themselves through this frame, without the immediate activation of shame and defense, the mirror can actually function. The window opens, even if only slightly. The narcissist can begin to see what is actually there, rather than only what the false self is willing to reveal. They can sit with the discomfort of their own pattern without reaching for the nearest knife to throw. This is the prerequisite for everything that follows in this series. If you cannot look in the mirror, if you cannot tolerate the reality of what is there without the system shutting it down, nothing changes. All of the techniques, all of the therapy modalities, all of the willpower in the world will only ever modify the surface. The architecture remains intact. The performance gets better. The person underneath does not heal. We'll go deeper on the architecture in the next episode when we ask the question this episode leaves open. So what actually can change? Not everything and not easily. In fact, Need is not optimistic about the prospects of most narcissists, and this series will not pretend that transformation is available to everyone who wants it. Change in pathological narcissism is rare, and the conditions for it are demanding, but the ones who do change, who do the genuine work for disidentification rather than the performance of self-improvement, they all start from the same place. They all look in the mirror, and for the first time they do not look away. Not because it's comfortable, because they finally understand that the discomfort of seeing clearly is survivable and that the alternative is not. And if you're still here, that question is already alive in you. The next episode is where we go to work with it. I'll see you in the next episode.